So we welcome everyone. For those that don't know, my name is Phil Flora, head of sales and marketing here at Leopard Solutions, which as of the middle of May is now part of SharePoint Technologies, which we're very excited about. Today's webinar is focused on the responses from a survey of diverse attorneys that in BigLaw that Leopard Solutions did in conjunction with Above the Law. This is the latest survey done by Leopard Solutions, with the goal being to document various demographics in the legal profession, focusing on responses in a single point in time, and then benchmarking those results against future studies to better understand what we need to do to support attorneys and professionals working in large law firms. We just recently did a survey of Gen Z attorneys in large law in conjunction with Major Lindsay in Africa. But today we're excited to talk about our survey of diverse professionals in large law, and we're excited to have a great panel with us today. Joining us today, we have Caren Ulrich, Stacy, CEO of Diversity Lab, Rosa Nunez from the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Foley Hoag, and a new initiative that the Foley Hoag is taking up as they do consulting services for DEI for non-legal. And Rosa, congratulations, is leading that effort. So congratulations. And Reggie McGee, he is our global head of diversity and recruiting at Reed Smith. We appreciate, again, the three of you joining us today. Laura Leopard, CEO, founder, and general manager, I have to get your title correct now, Leopard Solutions. Take it away.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of our terrific panelists for joining us today. And I'm going to share my screen as I begin to share all of the data that we have collected from the survey that we just completed. There will be a white paper coming out shortly as well. So here we're just looking at the survey that we took over the last several months, where we asked attorneys from underrepresented groups at the top 200 firms about their experience in big law. So in the summer of 2020, we embarked on a huge mission, and that was to identify attorneys from underrepresented groups in our database of then about 360,000 attorneys, so that firms could hire them. We knew it was difficult for recruiters and firms alike to find these attorneys, and we wanted to help. So we devised a method of probability of diversity, and we simply look at common data points that could point to an attorney being either having a high or low probability of being diverse. AI could not do it. We had to go record by record and attorney by attorney to determine the correct probability. No one else had ever done it, and no one has done it since. It took hard work and dedication to the cause to get it done. Once it was completed, it gave us the ability to report on diversity in the overall marketplace, as well as firm by firm. Here, we emailed attorneys that we had identified as having a high probability of being diverse. We emailed them directly, and we asked for their responses. 638 people completed the survey. 59% were women, 39% were men, and less than 1% identified as non-binary. Black or African American was at 31% in responses. Asian or Asian American was at 29%, Hispanic or Latino, Latinx, 17%, two or more races, 8%, American Indian or Alaska Native was 0.32%, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander was at 0.47%. Now, some preferred not to identify, or they had some other responses. Most were between the ages of 25 and 35. And 78% were either working at or had worked at a top 200 firm. Respondents really ran the gamut from, we had a few managing partners fill out the survey. Equity partners made up 15% of the mix. Non-equity partners were at 14%. 6% were of counsels. 21% were senior associates. 19% were mid-level, and 20% were junior associates. The other group was a bit of a mix. We had one managing partner in there, an equity partner, some senior counsels, and a few other titles. 64% responded that their goal upon entering a top 200 firm was to make partner. Just 12% said it was to gain experience and pay off debt. 22% said it was to gain experience and then move in-house, while just 2% said they would gain experience and start their own firm. Now, if you compare this to the Gen Z survey that we just did, you can see a much wider margin in this survey that were interested in being a partner. We had about the same response into moving into a government or nonprofit role. More in this survey desired to go in-house. So we took those answers from that career goals question and we broke it down by title. And you can see that mid-level and junior associates responses are slightly different from the other groups. The mid-level associate has fewer make partner responses and more go in-house than the groups ahead of it. The junior associate group more closely mirrors the Gen Z survey, with more voting for in-house and moving into government or nonprofit work. 52% of diverse lawyers in the 25 to 34 demographic wanted to make partner. That is still higher than Gen Z answered. Now, what caught my interest here was that the percentage of diverse lawyers seeking partnership declined with each preceding generation, from a high of 87% with the late Gen X, young baby boomer group, to 52% of millennials and Gen Z. 65% did not alter their goals after joining their firm, and 70% of them surveyed saw a path to partnership. When we broke it down by types, it just became a little clearer. However, the younger set did not see a path to partnership in much larger numbers, with mid-level saying no at 39% and junior associates saying no at 37%. Overall, however, the answers were quite positive. Most saw a path to partnership. It is notable that 40% responded that they wanted to stay at their firm until they retired. When we broke down this type, by type, the question shifts just a little more once again. Here we see the younger set with much lower responses for until I retire, and increased answers for 1 to 2 years. Junior associates answered 3 to 5 years most often at 39%. Now, in our world, they hit their ROI mark at 3 years, so this is a really good response. The groups with the most power answered until I retire in overwhelming margins. Of counsels and senior associates answered until I make partner most often. And Reggie, I think you had a comment about this particular point.
No, I mean, and I appreciate this information. The data is very enlightening. What I found most interesting goes to the point that you highlighted earlier, that while there's typically this assumption with Gen Z or even millennials that they want to come into the profession and they're looking to make a mark quickly and then move on, I was refreshed to see that many of them are looking to come into the profession and do have goals and aspirations to become managing or equity partners in their firm, which I think goes in complete opposite of what the general notion of younger associates and this next generation of the legal profession may have given us so far. So it's refreshing to see that when people are thinking about the profession and joining large law firms, that they're looking to stay for the long term.
I agree. This sort of belies the common thought that they're coming in for a short period of time. So let's look at some hiring stats for both diverse and non-diverse associates. We see that hiring diverse associate laterals hit a high mark in 2021 and then dropped over the next 2 years. The gap decreased in 2023, but the overall numbers for both groups were lower. This year is about half over, and even if the number of diverse laterals doubled at this point, it would still be lower than in 2023. Entry-level hiring is very interesting right now, and we see that the number of diverse entry-level hires grew in 2021 and dropped in the subsequent years as well. Even if the current number doubled, it would be over a 50% drop in diverse entry-level hiring, and this is an area where many are very concerned. A study by Georgetown University saw a 10 to 17% drop in public law school enrollments for minority students, but saw that enrollment really plummeted at the top 20 schools, where the share of minority students dropped between 36 and 47%. Black and Latino students accounted for almost all of the declines. Now, this is a drop that's going to be felt in future years, but it's concerning that we already see some of the numbers declining. So this chart just represents who they're hiring. The average has significantly increased for ethnically diverse women, growing from 16% in Q1 of 2023 to 25% in Q2 of 2024. Diverse men's hiring average has gone up and down, but it's up once more at 14%. The percentage of white women being hired has dropped from 37% in Q4 of last year to just 27% today. And white males' percentage has dropped from 38% in Q3 of last year to 34% today. We asked the question, have you encountered bias at the top 200 law firm that you work in? 62% said yes. So breaking down the yes a bit, of ethnicities with statistically relevant samples, Black identifying lawyers encountered more bias at 67% than their Hispanic counterparts at 59% and Asian counterparts at 62%. Diverse women made up a large share of the respondents, and these were some of the sentiments that they shared with us. It showed that many felt they were treated differently. Racist remarks, being asked to order food for all their meetings, not being supported after having children, not being invited out to drinks or events, and being treated less than in their eyes. It really echoed the sentiments from our previous surveys of women in big law, and it shows that these issues are still very much with us. Rosa, I think you'd like to comment on these statistics.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Laura and Phil, and to my co-facilitators and panelists here for having me. I'm extremely excited to be contributing to this conversation. Well, Laura, I mean, this is no secret, at least from people that do this work in the legal industry, the D&I work. I mean, it's no secret that issues of bias continue to be critical and big law, which disproportionately impacts members from underrepresented backgrounds, in particular, those from Black and Brown communities. I mean, across the industry, we still see what we call the all boys club mentality, which results and tend to exclude members of the out groups, which, include women, people of color, members of the LGBTQ community, people with disabilities, and more. And bias really impacts everything. It impacts the life cycle of the career of success of an attorney, impacts how work is being allocated. We have a lot of biases that play in law firms, but the most common ones are confirmation bias, stereotypes, the halo and horn effects. I mean, I can go on, which results in members from historical underrepresented communities not getting enough work or enough good billable work that is meaningful to their career advancement at law firms. And disparities in hours and opportunities really lead to gaps in development and the perception of competency that results in the confidence of the attorneys and associates in this case being tarnished and less work being assigned to them. And bias also has a huge impact on performance feedback and how feedback is being delivered. not only bias, but also the lack of tools and many people being afraid of saying the wrong thing, right? It impacts how honest and how critical feedback that is extremely important for the development of attorneys is given or sometimes not given, right? Resulting in associates not being able to perform and meet the expectations of the law firm. And these issues, I mean, this is just a sample of on how biases impact attorneys, especially those from underrepresented communities in law firms, impact and becomes what we call a vicious cycle, Laura, and creating issues on retention, creating a leaking pipeline, and unfortunately impacting how many attorneys actually become of color, become partners at law firms. So there's a lot of efforts that law firms have been doing, great efforts to recruit and attract the best possible diverse talent within the within their firms. But the minute that the talent is in-house, we still have a lot of work to do to break biases and make sure that everyone has equitable, not equal opportunities, but equitable opportunities to be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And this follows what you just said. This is about work opportunities or the lack thereof. And that was a big issue for the respondents of this survey, citing no work opportunities, being excluded from opportunities, not getting enough work, billable work going to white colleagues. It's something that many feel in BigLaw. And Caren, I think you'd like to weigh in on this.
I was just adding to the chat. Rosa, you had mentioned fear of saying the wrong thing. And I think Kenji and David from NYU have just written a great book on Say the Right Thing that I posted into the chat because I thought that was such an important point that you made.
Yeah. So this slide is actually from our survey of DEI professionals from the top 200 firms in 2023. And this relates to the lack of opportunity that we just discussed when some feel at their firm. And it's really here to showcase that 73% of the DEI professionals working in BigLaw said they did not have a metric to measure how attorney work assignments are distributed in line with their DEI goals. This is a really important metric and could help firms measure the lack of opportunity. I mean, you can't improve what you don't measure. If firms are not measuring how work is distributed, it would be nearly impossible to set that right. The implementation of such a system could at the very least give associates an appearance of fairness and that the firm is working to correct the situation.
So Laura, I would love to chime in on those 2 points, both what the associates said and then obviously what the diversity directors and others have said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is a point of agreement among everyone that both the associates and the partners who, you know, climbed that hill realize that the type of work, the quality and the quantity of work you get is one of the most, if not the most important talent processes that occur in a law firm. And not only did we see the lawyers who fill out the survey say that, but we're seeing the diversity directors, the talent managers, and the partners who have climbed to the top of that mountain say the same thing. And it's interesting because, you know, before I started Diversity Lab, I started a company called Lawyer Metrics, and we did an analysis of American lawyers, a mid-level associate survey. So we took 20 years of their data, 48,000 responses to that data, and we looked at all 165 questions that go to why an associate is satisfied and decides to stay or not stay at their firm. And everybody likes to talk about compensation as an important aspect of that, but it turns out that compensation only matters if work is a problem. So if you're an associate in a law firm and you're getting high quality work that you feel like is going towards your autonomy and your mastery and your growth, it's the Daniel Pink drive, behavioral science. If you feel like you're getting the type of work that's helping you to grow and develop, comp doesn't matter as much. And some of those other things like work-life balance even doesn't matter as much. So the holy grail of an associate's experience is work. And so if I was in a law firm setting and suggesting one thing that folks could work on from a talent management perspective, including thinking about our underrepresented populations, it would be work allocation. And I will tell you, at Diversity Lab, we test a lot of different ways to approach these types of things. And one of the things we've seen with work allocation is that left unstructured, people rely on those biases that Rosa mentioned. They rely on who they saw last in the hall, or in our Zoom world, who they talked to last on Zoom or via email. Oftentimes, they rely on those biases of who have I worked with previously and it's gone well, so I'll just go back to that same human. But one of the things that we've noticed is that when you structure something, anything, it does not have to be an overhaul of your entire work assignment process. Small things make big impacts. So in a firm, for instance, we tested, if we just asked everyone to slow down, the Daniel Kahneman behavioral science, slow thinking, fast thinking, and we asked everyone to enact fast thinking. And we said, every time you assign work, a pitch, a client matter, you're working with somebody on pro bono, you're about to write an article, think of those people you would typically go to, and then think of 5 more people who you might not typically go to. Maybe it's a new lateral who's just joined that you don't know a lot about. Maybe it's somebody in a different office that you've never had a chance to work with, and just go into slow thinking and ask the partners and the senior associates and the mid-level associates who are assigning work to slow down and consider a broad group of humans before they enact that fast thinking. And small changes like that have shown to have an effect. Now, there needs to be some accountability to the lawyers having that slow thinking moment, but sometimes small changes to talent processes make a big impact. So again, if I was sitting around my law firm and trying to decide how I wanted to make life better for associates and make it inclusive and equitable, and that I want my associates to stay, tackle work assignments.
And if I may weigh in as well to Caren's point, I think it's important to note that this is a multi-pronged approach. There, of course, has to be more outreach. There has to be initiatives in place that are going to meet underrepresented groups, whether that be first-generation attorneys or underrepresented ethnic groups or traditionally marginalized groups, and make sure that they are first informed about the profession and the opportunities available to them. Also, a part of that information has to be to convey an understanding of the rigor, the expectations, the knowledge of what's required to be successful in the practice of law. But then it's also to keep in mind from a firm perspective that recruitment and retention are so linked that you can't focus in one area without understanding the implication in others. And it can't be an either or approach. It has to be a multi-purposed approach at the same time, and understanding that as each area is addressed, then it creates ripples, positive and negative, that just gets you to a point where you have to continue to evolve and assess again. So there's so much information and data, which is why one, I'm glad to be a part of this conversation, and then two, to thank Laura and Leopard Solutions and Caren and the work that you're doing at Diversity Lab of giving us tools to get access to data, so that not only can we critique ourselves, but the industry as a whole has to have an honest conversation when we reconcile the fact that new associates want to be here. They want to do good work. They may not be able to define that in the beginning, but that's where training comes in. That's where mentorship and sponsorship and leadership comes in. But then at the same time, something is happening where the attrition rate is double for underrepresented groups, even those that want to be here. When we're getting the best and brightest and smartest students, what is happening in the process where we're losing them at rates that I don't think anyone is comfortable with? So we can really start diving into this data and having realistic and honest conversations, and then not expecting change overnight. And I guess we can say that after 20 years of talking about this problem, it's clear that change doesn't come overnight. But there has to be a point where we start trying something different and new than what we've done in the past.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't do the same thing over and over and expect different results. Absolutely. So the question of bias, right? We saw that there was a good percentage of people who had experienced bias, 62% at their firm. And we all just have to acknowledge that it does exist, whether it's racial or gender or sexual orientation bias. It exists at these firms, and these attorneys report feeling it and seeing it at work. Not being seen is a hallmark of exclusionary behavior. Associates who don't feel seen are excluded from the group. They feel marginalized and less than. Now, I include this was a write-in answer on the survey, and I included this entire statement because I think we should recognize that good intentions can still fail. Even if you do everything by the book, you do training and messaging regarding diversity, go into the firm, it can still fall on deaf ears. And the inclusion that we spoke about also means that attorneys of color should see leaders of color at their firm in order to be really comfortable and confident in their role. Diversifying at the top is really key to diversity down the line at the firm. And Rosa, I think you wanted to comment on this.
Yes, thank you, Laura. I mean, as painful as it is for me to read this, I am so glad that you were able to collect such rich information, because this is exactly what many people are feeling and dealing with. As we know, the current environment, like today's law firm, and how we manage and how we lead law firms, it is not the same as how it was done 20, 25, 30 years ago. We have a more, because of the efforts of my colleagues and law firms across the country, they're doing really good work to diversify their attorney population. I mean, legal recruiting teams and actually a lot of leaders are really pushing for us to continue to break barriers and to give access to this space to people that historically didn't have access. So we're doing a lot of that. And law firms are looking different. I mean, not where we want them to be, but they're looking different than 20, 15, 30 years ago. Now, the way that we lead and the way that we train and the way that we mentor, it's not the same. And it's also not a size fits all. And we have, I mean, a lot of great attorneys made partners because the amazing legal work that they do, not necessarily because of how they lead or the people skills that they have. So something that we're doing here at Foley Hoag is that a lot of our efforts around retention, we know we have to tackle it from the top. We have implemented and created an in-house program all around inclusive leadership. So we are equipping our leaders, and we define leaders as someone that has a say and stake on someone else's career. So anywhere from senior associates and up, including our business managers, go through a series of programs under the Foley Hoag Inclusive Leadership umbrella that is actually designed in-house, where we equip our leaders once again with the principles of what leading an inclusive workplace means. If you want to lead associates, if you want to motivate, if you want to grow, if you want to incentivize the people that work in your teams, you really have to understand what inclusive leadership means. It's not a one size fits all. You have to get to know your people. You have to get to know how to promote, like how to incentivize them. You have to get to know how to provide feedback that is not only fair, but that is equitable. Right? You have to get to know how to advocate for those that might not have the stronger voice, but you have to know how to advocate for those that in the room, right? When they deserve it. So we have this comprehensive program because we believe that changing the mindset of how things were done 30 years ago is critical to the success of the development and also the success of our goals of diversifying the top of the house. And it is a journey, not a destination, Laura, but I think that's one step that we're taking because what we were doing before wasn't working. So we really need to start tackling this from the top.
Couldn't agree.
And again, Rosa, to your point, I think, one beautiful thing about Gen Z is that they seem to really have a skill set that's going to take the profession into some amazing places in the future. Their ability to adapt and embrace technology, coupled with their community activism and engagement, I think are some wonderful qualities that we should embrace and look forward to. And one thing I appreciate, I know I'm brushing a very broad window or a picture of that segment of our marketplace, but Gen Z also seems to say, you know, if you let us know what to do, we'll do it. And one thing that I really appreciate about what we're trying to do here at Reed Smith is that we've tried to really demystify the process of starting at our firm and ending at our firm. And I encourage a lot of firms to think about how, when you present your firm and this mythical idea on many levels of becoming equity partner, what does that mean on a practical level, not only for the firm, but also for the individual, and then showing roadmaps and showing training and development and opportunities to not only learn to be the best professional, but also learn how your skill set contributes to the overall growth, health, and longevity of the firm. Because this is the next generation. None of our firms will be here. None of our legal organizations will be here without identifying excellent talent and feeding that talent and helping that talent grow. And a lot of it, especially for underrepresented groups and first generation attorneys, is, do I have perspective, and have I been exposed, and do I have the sophistication to hit the ground running in a short enough window where I can not only feel confident about my career, but then also feel that I'm contributing back to my firm in a meaningful way. And the best way to do that is to not hide the ball. You know, give as much information, tailor mentorship, making sure that we're being transparent. And then I think the evaluation of them is a lot fairer as well, versus thinking the ones that get it will get it, versus, and the ones that don't, then we'll figure out a way to either offload them or they will go somewhere else, and we'll only hang on to those that figure it out on their own. If we can demystify this, and that will help tremendously in a significant way for the profession of not losing some talent. Because if we really look at the beginning of the pipeline, many of the people that are coming into large law firms are stellar. They've been, you know, top of their class from elementary school all the way up to law school, which I'm not saying is a requirement, but in many cases, these are great students. So they have wonderful skill sets, so they can do the practical work. It's just understanding that this is a service-oriented profession. And that means that if the client needs something on a Monday, then you may have to give up a Saturday and Sunday to provide that work. And it's understanding that coming in the door, that there isn't necessarily a conflict with work-life balance, but it's that work allows you to create the type of life that you can enjoy because it provides resources. And if we can demystify some of this and make sure that they're understanding that in the front end, and then giving them tools in the process, and hopefully this is one way of attacking a much larger issue. But we have to chip away at it from a lot of different angles to get the results that we're looking for.
If I can just add one more thing, Laura, I really love what you just said, Reggie. I think that a huge push is to put the human behind the attorney. Like, we have to really understand that we're dealing with our best and most valuable asset at law firms. They come up and down the elevator every day. Every single year, they're looking different. And every single year, they have higher and higher expectations of their places of work. I mean, and we as leaders of law firms need to understand that. And we need to, you know, one of the foundations of inclusive leadership is trust. If I can trust you as my leader, I can give you my best. And if I'm not giving you my best, you're not giving your clients your best. So how can you really have the tools that you need? And I echo what the participants said here about most of these things happen to be unconscious. And it's true. And it's also a lack of awareness. And if we focus on creating those opportunities where people can have the tools that they need to lead differently, I think it's going to be transformational. Not only are they going to allow their associates and attorneys under, like when we talk about partners, to be more engaged, to be more connected, to be more motivated and driven to stay at the organization, but ultimately the partner is going to be 3 times more successful.
Agreed. And I'll just add to that, and then also combining it with Reggie's point about transparency. making sure that our populations understand what are the requirements for partnership? How do you get there? What happens when you get there? What's expected of you? And then how do you succeed in that role? And of course, Reggie won't be surprised to hear, and Rosa won't either, because they're both Mansfield firms. But we run data on that because one of the requirements of the Mansfield rule is that processes for advancement and job descriptions. So what does it mean to be an equity partner? What does it mean to be a managing partner? What does it mean to be the practice group leader? It's required that those things are written down and accessible so that we're not hiding the ball from the associate who thinks they might want that, but doesn't know how it works or how to get there or what happens when you get there. And our data shows that the more transparent firms are about those processes and the more transparent firms are about their expectations, that they double diversity in leadership over time. Because folks are looking up, and one, I think, Reggie, you made this point, and Rosa did too, they see people who look like them, but two, the rules got written down. So they weren't guessing. They weren't trying to figure out how it works and hoping that they would get that information from the person down the hall, but instead they wrote it down and said, here it is. So it's a level playing field.
Yep. And if no one has seen our Gen Z white paper or our survey, they echoed that throughout. Tell me, they wanted transparency about the path to partnership and what happens afterwards. They just wanted transparency and they asked for it over and over. That's available on the website, but that's a fantastic point. Fantastic point. And now we know, thanks to your research, that diversity doubles at the top once transparency is there. Incredible. Okay. How do you do that? This slide came from our DEI professional survey in 2023. What more can be done by your firm to promote equity partnerships among underrepresented groups? And the largest response by far was for business development. Sponsorship followed a close second, and mentorship, more fair attribution of work, and measuring work assignments more equitably were tied. This is a no-brainer. It's been shown over and over again that these are the things that really help move that needle. And Caren, did you want to comment on this?
I do. In particular, I want to comment on the credit allocation because money talks.
Yep.
Right? Economic influence in firms. And I think the person being quoted on the slide before this was a bit alluding to this a bit when they said real producers. I think who they're referring to are those rainmakers. And Rosa, you said this, and I agree. Typically in a law firm setting, the rainmakers, the people who bring in the work, are then also tapped to lead the firm, regardless of whether or not they're good leaders or good relationship managers or good at delegation or feedback or any of those things that we say are important inclusive leadership skills. But regardless of that, the rainmakers are tapped to run our firms. And so the path to power is often paved through bringing in clients, getting credit for bringing in those clients, and then being rewarded for having done that. And there's three pieces to that puzzle. First, you have to have access to clients. Two, you have to understand how credit works and how it's allocated, because sometimes in law firms, that's also not transparent. And there's a lot of backroom door, closed door backroom deals happening. And then the third piece of it is you actually have to get recognized for that credit. And so that's something else we're seeing in law firms where 10 years ago, there was no discussion of the economic influence piece of this puzzle. But now we're talking about how do you get access to the client? What is the credit recognition and how does it work at the firm? And is that transparent? Again, to Reggie's point. And then did I get the credit? Was it inclusive in the way it was doled out? And was it, did I have equal access to be getting, to be in the room where we were talking about who got the credit and then ultimately how it spanned out? We're adding this to Mansfield rule. We have about 30 firms who are in the midst of testing transparency around credit recognition, how it works, what it means to get it or not get it, and then how does it play in terms of compensation. And it's been interesting because just the definition alone has been hard to talk about because it is such an emotionally charged piece of the puzzle. But again, hearkening back, when we talk about if I could tackle one thing in law firms that would make it a better world for our associates as a whole, but also in particularly for our underrepresented populations, it'd be work allocation. But on the partner side, the most important thing we could be tackling right now is that economic influence and the business development credit or recognition that comes with it. And I say recognition because some firms have origination, some firms have client generation. They all call it something different, but regardless of what it's called, people with economic influence have power, and people with power move through the law firm in ways that folks who don't.
And if I can just add to that, Caren, that is extremely critical. If you ask some folks around law firms that have been, partners and rainmakers for 20, 30, 40 years, if you ask them anything about, what matters, they'll tell you the only color that I care about is green. Right? And I think we have to break some of the behaviors that we hear about. Well, I had to, walk barefooted up and down the snow for, 20 years and take the bus all the way across town to go to law school. And, you have to pay your dues. And I think that although that is okay and very valid, why do we have to make it harder? Why do we have to make it harder for people, in particular people of color, that we start from the beginning in a very different, with a different level playing field? We have to prove ourselves constantly. A lot of us are brought up in situations or in cultures and communities where speaking up is not appropriate. Like, for example, when I was growing up, my parents used to tell me, you have to keep your head down. You can't be, ruffling any feathers. Don't be asking your superiors for anything that you don't deserve. Keep it calladita, más bonita. Ask me how that would have worked out for me. But a lot of people still hold those values true to themselves. So I think having intentional leaders that are not afraid and are courageous to reach back and pull people forward and create a legacy that when folks look back 30 years from now, they think about that that partner that really gave them the credit that they deserved, that changed the trajectory of their lives. I mean, that is how we have to think about things like that. And hopefully we'll get there one day, but that's my bread and butter every day.
And,
Wow.
and if I may add one comment that I think has to be an overarching perspective that we must keep in focus, is that if there seems to be any hesitation or any conflict in the notion of excellence and diversity, it has to be addressed. There is no replacing excellence in the hope of finding diverse talent or increasing diversity in organizations. And I think if there's any organization that is dealing with that, then until they address that issue, then all other policies are going to be undermined. Because for me, having been exposed to such dynamic and amazing diverse talent, I know that there is no doubt that giving resources and opportunity and direction, that they can do any work that's available and do it at a very top level. So the question can't be, is there a big enough pool? The answer is definitely. The question is, how do we access that pool, and then how do we support and elevate that pool so that 5 years from now we're not talking about the same things that we've been talking about for the last 20 years.
Yeah. Excellent point. So back to our survey, we also asked them what their biggest frustration was in working at a top 200 firm, and 42% said work-life balance. And interestingly enough, in this survey, more men than women chose work-life balance. Now, when asked a similar question on the Gen Z survey, the answers were more tilted toward women wanting more work-life balance, but not with this group. The women in Gen Z were actually willing to trade compensation for lower billable hours, with women voting for that at 58% and men just 42%. 41% said that they had been assigned a mentor by the firm. 34% totally agreed that the partners valued their work. And if you add in the next 36% who somewhat agreed, that's a really, really good score. The firm's assignment of work garnered the highest neutral vote at just 33%. And 17% totally agreed that the system was fair. Just 17% agreed that they thought work attribution was fair. 29% totally agreed that their firm provided informal networking within the firm. Now, just 5% are very dissatisfied with their job, but only 13% were very satisfied. Somewhat satisfied took the largest share at 39%. If you left your current position, what new opportunity would interest you most? In-house ranked the highest at 35%. Going to another AmLaw 200 firm ranked second with 28. Government was 11, and taking a senior position that is not legally specific in the private sector ranked 11%. Just 9% were actively searching for a new job. 44% were open to new opportunities. 47% were not at all interested in moving. But when we broke this up by type, you can see that more mid-levels were actively looking at 16%, followed by of-counsels and senior associates in a tie at about 10%. Junior associates were actively looking at 8%. When we see that 7% of non-equity partners are actively looking and 4% of equity partners are. Each band had similar responses to open to new opportunities. Overall, very small responses indicating the urge to leave. And Reggie, I think you wanted to say something about that.
And I think the chart demonstrates what we see. There's a point in an associate's development and career where they start to assess where they are, and they start to determine, am I going to, reinvest in this environment, or do I need to look for other opportunities to accelerate my career? And I think for many firms, that's also the point where you're really starting to see the return on that investment. So if there's ever an infusion point, this would be a good place to start, to say, we've done the training, the culture, you're a part of this community. What do we need to do maybe a year or two ahead of time, so that when we get to this point, we're not having the conversation, or we're not increasing the likelihood that individuals are looking to leave. And even if you compare the survey, the first survey slide where it showed working in-house or going to another firm, I think it also reinforces the notion that the departure isn't necessarily away from the profession. They're just trying to really find a home where they can feel valued, supported, and their practices can grow. And sometimes that's going in-house to a client, which I think is a wonderful opportunity. Sometimes our associates, or even our junior partners, are distinguishing themselves and then getting wonderful opportunities. And then what we hope is that they'll become clients of the firm. And then in other situations, you see that they aren't leaving the notion of BigLaw practice. They're just trying to find a better fit. And I think all those are introspective conversations that hopefully, if there's transparency and there's open modes of communication, they can be identified and teased out sooner. And therefore, there can be a reduction in the recidivism or transition out of firms for most of our associates.
If I can add to that quickly, Laura, I feel like that's such a great point, Reggie, because what we have seen is that a lot of associates, when they hit the 4th, 5th, 6th year, that's when they start dropping, and particularly associates of color, which of course limits the amount of associates that get to go to the partnership ranks, right? And what's happening is that lack of transparency, lack of trust, lack of a feeling of belonging, all of those things play into how engaged the attorney is with the organization. And there's a big difference between engagement and work satisfaction. I can be satisfied with my work if I like what I'm doing, if I'm getting paid okay, if I like where I come to work, I like the people, but I'm not engaged. Engagement means that I'm 100% invested in my organization, and it will take a miracle for me to want to go someplace else. Like, I have roots and I see myself belonging here long term. A lot of folks are coming in because of the lack of transparency, because of the lack of inclusive leadership, because of the presence of biases that have and go unchecked in many different instances, right? Lack of seeing people that look like them. They don't see folks that look like them at the top. Like, what are my chances that I'm going to make it? That creates a sense of, I want to go and see what else is out there, even if I make a mistake. I rather take a leap of faith than stay here.
Wow. Yep. You're right. That's what that means. Well, and this speaks to this in a way. 50% of the respondents said they saw themselves in their same firm and on the partner track in 5 years, which is really a great statistic. These folks are, they're there for the firms to keep or lose, and it's what they do that will help determine, that outcome. Almost 20% said they saw themselves going in-house. About 13% saw themselves going to a different law firm. 19% saw themselves moving in-house. When asked if they had a child, would they recommend law to them as a career? 37% said yes, 28% said no, and 35% were unsure.
It's funny, Laura, that looks like a lot of the favorability rankings for some of our politicians. But I do think it is kind of, it shows that there's so much opportunity for impact and influence.
Yeah.
That engagement can really have an impact on determining the final outcome of these relationships. And hopefully we as an industry recognize that there are various points where we can just have conversations that are transparent and open again, that can have an impact on whether we are investing in or retaining talent.
Absolutely. Good point. Now, we asked this question because I have been told by many recruiters that they had clients that had experienced this. So 32% of the respondents of the survey said they had been asked to sit in on a client pitch and then were not assigned the work. We'd also heard at times the pitch they were asked to participate in did not even concern their area of practice. And here, 15% of the respondents had been in that situation. We sliced the answers by titles and we got a bit more of an interesting picture. The junior associates who had the highest level of respondents in the survey had the lowest yes response, followed by mid-levels. And you can kind of view this in two different ways. The top partners answered in the affirmative at a much higher rate than the people below them. So you could look at this as times have changed, or you could look at it that the younger cohorts have just not, they're just not experienced enough to be asked to sit in on that pitch. So checking boxes, whether they're diverse or they're female, many people felt this way. Many were aware at the time that they were simply sitting on that pitch just to show diversity on the team, but they didn't get the work. Others had seen their pictures added to slide decks, but they had never participated either in the actual pitch or the work itself. 71% said they were not aware of being given a work assignment because of a client request for a more diverse representation. 64% said their firm does not have a diversity initiative where it has pledged pro bono hours to advance racial equity. 68% of respondents have access to a formal mentoring program. 60% have access to professional skills development, which was something the Gen Z survey really cried out for. We just asked for if there's anything you would like to say to the firm, please, fill out this section. We got a lot of interesting responses, a lot calling for fairness, not even in relation to just diverse associates, but fairness overall. There were lots of really interesting comments that came in, and many heartfelt comments and shared experiences that came in as well.
Laura, there was one comment that I saw that I think speaks back to the point I was making earlier about diversity and excellence, and the notion that you can seek diversity at the risk of seeking meritocracy.
Yeah.
And I think, again, we have to do whatever we can, whenever we can, to dispel the notion that excellence and excellent work and having diverse viewpoints and perspectives around the table are somehow at odds. Because at the baseline of all of this, the quality of the associates that are being sought after and hired in the firms are top notch.
Yeah.
And therefore, there shouldn't be a question of whether they can do this work or whether they belong. The question is, what tools and resources can we place around them so that they can be successful?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good point. We just put together a little summary of sort of the largest takeaways from the survey. The largest gender group of respondents were female. Black or African American attorneys answered the most, 31%, followed by Asian or Asian American. 60% were associates, 29% were partners. This group wanted to make partner at their firm at 70%, and many saw a path to do that, which is fantastic. Most wanted to stay at their firm, with very small percentages actively looking for another opportunity. 63% aimed to make partner. 62% of respondents had encountered bias at their firm, and 32% disclosed that they were invited to participate on a pitch but were not involved in the subsequent work. 34% said their firms had diversity initiatives, pledging, works to advance racial equity. Just 29% were aware of receiving work assignments due to client request for more diverse representation. So I think this survey tells a story that's brighter than many expected, but it definitely shows that there are still hurdles for them to overcome. And that is the end of the survey. We will have these slides available as well as a video of the presentation. There will be a white paper coming out shortly, which will take all of these fantastic comments and everything that was in the survey into account. So we look forward to that. Do we have anything from the Q&A that we should try to answer, Phil?
Caren, someone asked about there was a source on the work allocation that you mind just repeating that part?
Yeah, I'll see if I can put it in the chat. If not, Phil, I'll send it to you so that you can include it in the materials.
That'd be awesome. Appreciate it. Any last comments, feedback, Reggie, Rosa, Caren, you guys want to share as we wrap up?
Well, I just want to say thank you for this conversation and for doing the work. I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think we've made a lot of progress. Yes. And I know that the people committed on this call will continue to do work, and I pledge to do the same thing. But I'll say a message to the younger attorneys that may be on this call. At the baseline of this, there are people that are here to support you and to see you be successful. You are the next generation. If you feel that you're in environments where that doesn't work, I would first start working internally, find your partners, find your community, make sure that you don't feel isolated, which is sometimes a self-imposed environment that we place ourselves in. Find community, but then, find those to advocate for you if you can't advocate for yourself, and don't go it alone. And then if you do, always make sure that you have outside counsel, meaning whether that be people that you trust or others in the community or the industry. Make sure that you're getting sound advice, and then plan. Being impulsive, I think, sometimes works against us, where when you are being thoughtful and putting plans in place, then you can you can filter questions and you can ask for resources and you can ask for advice that helps, even if you choose to transition it, to be as smooth as possible. And just know that people are working not only to tell you what you need to do to improve, but they're also working to improve the environments that you walk into. So, be optimistic, be courageous, continue to do great work, and know that there is a community of people that are a step ahead of you or a little older than you, that are doing our best to make sure that we fix some of the problems that you hopefully won't have to face and that we've faced as we've tried to grow our career. So good luck to you all, and we're proud of you, and just keep working hard.
I mean, it's really hard to follow Reggie because he hit on every single point that I wanted to address. But I would say that I want to reinforce that there's a lot of amazing people doing great work at law firms across the U.S. and the world to address these disparities. There's a lot of folks and leadership that are intentional about making their law firms the best and most diverse workplace for everyone. And I'm a testament to that. There's a lot of folks that have the right hearts and the right mindsets, but just need the tools. And a lot of the things that you've seen is just a lack of awareness. And I think that there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope because people want to change. People want to provide the resources that we need to make sure that folks are growing and being successful. Don't give up. It's a very tough environment. Law firms are being attacked. D&I is being attacked. But those law firms that are doing the right work are doubling down on their efforts. D&I, it's not going anywhere. We are here to stay. So just to make sure that we understand that diversity is not going anywhere, I just think we need to be a little bit more intentional about it. So there's hope. Find your tribe, use the resources, advocate for yourself, hold your leaders accountable within your law firms, because if you just give up and go someplace else, you're not making an impact and improving the place that you're in right now. So I think that the future is bright, as long, as much as we want to see that it's not, it is bright. And there's a lot of folks, including those in here and the call, that are fighting the good fight. So just support your D&I professionals at your law firms. They're going through a lot and they're not giving up. That's my advice for today.
Love it.
Thank you.
And I'll be short. +1 on Reggie, +1 on Rosa. And the one addition is for the law firm leaders who are listening, our goal is fairness. So please approach everything you do with that mantra. And in particular, please don't place the responsibility of creating a more inclusive and diverse work environment on your underrepresented lawyers. Please spread the wealth on creating a fair and equitable environment such that everyone takes responsibility for making it a great place to work, so everyone has the equal opportunity they need to thrive and advance. Please.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for taking part in this today. You gave some really incredible comments. Rosa, you almost made me cry at one point. So thank you all.
Well, great stuff. So I dropped a link in the chat for to keep track of when this white paper and everything will be released. So you can register there. This was recorded. We're going to share everything. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys taking the time today. I know we went a little over, but it was really great stuff. So appreciate it. And have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.